Today I'm testing the new Nano Banana Pro or Nano Banana 2, but this time I'm taking things a step further. Before sending anything to AI, I'll walk you through how I designed and modeled this architectural concept in Rhino, explaining some of the decisions and tools along the way. Once the model is ready, we'll bring it into Nano Banana Pro to apply materials, generate the environment, and place the entire building inside a plaza. Let's see how far the new version can push a project when we start from a clean, fully modeled design. And as always, I would like to remind you that Rhino is a curved modeling software, meaning that instead of starting modeling with a box or a cylinder, in Rhino we usually start off with a curve. And in this case, I'm going to be designing an architecture that is going to have a deconstructivism influence, so that means irregular geometries and sharp edges. I think it's a pretty cool and unique style, so that is why I'm going for it. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Because I'm going for sharp edges, I'll be picking the polyline and not the control point curve. The control point curve is mostly used for curved and organic designs. If you want to know how to model them, you can explore some of our videos in our channel. I'm going to be activating Grid Snap here, and also make sure that you have the ortho or orthogonal tool on so that we can snap to the X, Y, and Z axes. I'm going to be starting off from the origin and defining the height of my architecture. I want it to be a pretty tall pavilion, maybe 3 to 4 floors. And the idea is to have this placed in a plaza or square, so it ends up being some kind of landmark. I'm going to go with 12 meters, so that's 12 m. So I'll go ahead and type in 12. If you're not familiar with meters, or you work with other units, and you want to follow along, you can press the M for meters, and then click once. The design that I'm going for is going to be made up of 3 different geometries. And now I can go ahead and type in 15, and now let's go all the way down, because at this stage I want to create some kind of balcony. Therefore, I'm going to be needing around 2.8 meters in height minimum. Now let's go all the way to this side and close it. Okay, so that's one geometry. Let's go ahead and model the second one, again by using the polyline. So in this case, I'm just going to be typing in polyline. And I want this next geometry to be aligned with this one. So it's going to be a good idea to activate the smart track and move the cursor to this corner here and lower it down. You will be able to see that Rhino creates this extra helping guide. And I'm going to be clicking down here, and let's go all the way up to around 20 meters. Next, let's head over to the right side to around 15 meters, and then we can close it down here. And I have the orthogonal constraint, so I'll turn it off and close it like so. So we have our 2 initial geometries. Now let's go for the third one, and the third one I was thinking of placing it up here so that we can create some kind of overlapping effect. And to be more efficient, I'm going to be pressing Ctrl plus Shift, grab these 2 lines and type in offset. I'm going to go with an offset of 1. And then of course we need to close it, create the polyline from this point to this other point to close it down here, and then we have to close it all the way on this right top side. Alright, so once we defined our initial shape, we can jump into the perspective view so that we can start our 3D modeling process. And I'll start off with our first object and make sure that down here you have the gumball turned on. Next, I'm going to be pressing on the extrude tool from our gumball and typing in 15. Let's do the same thing for this one, so 15 meters this way. And next, I'm going to be isolating the curves for my overlapped element. And to select curves here in Rhino, we just need to go ahead and type in cell CRV. Once selected, I'm going to be isolating them by typing in isolate. I'll get rid of this one, and with Ctrl plus Shift, I'll be selecting these curves so that I end up with these 4. And to join them, I'll select them and type in join. And in order to unhide everything here, you can use the command show. Let's drag this to the back on the y-axis by 5 meters and drag it all the way back here. Okay, so far so good. Now let's add some details. So in order to add some complexity and movement to our facade and overall design, we can start cutting our shapes a little bit. The best way to do that is again by using a polyline. And I'm going to be starting off with our first object, and it's a good practice to select the object and isolate it so that you don't have any distractions. And what I want to do is to cut this geometry, and for this I think it's better to jump into a top view. Now I can create a polyline from this point to this other point here, And there's multiple ways that we can cut it, but the fastest way for me is by using the cut tool inside the gumball. The cut tool is only available on Rhino 8, so keep that in mind. Next, I'll be just clicking and dragging this down and delete it like so. I also want to create two different objects in here. So I want to have one vertical element and a horizontal one. Again, to cut them, we can use a polyline. And you can see that my cursor snapped to the perpendicular point up here, because down here I've got OSnap turned on alongside the perpendicular object snap. Once you're done drawing the curve, remember to use the spacebar to end the drawing basically. And again, I'll just use the cut tool on our gumball like so. The reason that I did this is because I want to create some kind of balcony in here, for which I'll be selecting this surface with Ctrl+Shift. Then I'm going to be typing in dop border to duplicate the border of this surface, type it in offset, and I'll offset this by 0.3. Now I can select this curve, and in this case I don't have the cut tool on because the control points are not aligned. And I'm not going to be worrying about that because there's multiple ways of doing the same thing here in Rhino. So let's extrude this curve by 1 meter. I'll be selecting the top geometry and typing in Boolean difference. Then I'll just select this box that I've created and hit enter and delete this box. So there's our balcony. Type in show again, and I'm going to be dragging this a little bit further to the back, so that's around 3 more meters, in order to leave some breathing space up here. And I think I'm going to make the height of the balcony a bit higher. So I'm going to be grabbing this top surface and then the bottom one and dragging them down by 1 more meter. There we go. Now I'm going to be jumping to this right geometry and add some details to it. So again, let's go to a front view. And the first thing that I'm going to do is to pick the polyline and create some interesting windows. So something like this on this side. And I want the window to follow this diagonal gesture. So I'm going to be picking this curve and move it to this side. And then picking this edge with Ctrl+Shift, type it in offset, and we can offset this by around 3 meters. There we go. We can grab now both of these curves, and by using the trim command, we can trim it in this way. Now let's go back to a perspective view, and we probably need to join them first. So join, I'm going to be unabling grid snap, moving this to the side, and probably this is a little bit too high. So let's reduce the height there and cut it all the way through. All right, and I'm going to also be picking this edge and dragging it up here, maybe a little bit higher. Okay, this is looking pretty good. And let's keep on adding some details. So I'm going to jump into the front view and I'll be creating a subtle void. Let me just activate the grid snap. And the idea of this void that I'll be creating is to fit this left geometry inside of it. And you can see that I've drawn this badly, and the fastest way to align all of these points is by clicking, in this case, on the y-axis and typing in 0. Then let's just use the cut tool from our gumball and we can delete this. Now I can push this in like so. I can also go ahead and align this bottom surface by picking it with Ctrl+Shift and move it upwards to this point. Now I'm going to be jumping back to the front view and I'm going to be cutting another little piece down here, which will end up being some kind of cover for the users whenever it's raining. So I'm going to be again picking the polyline and I'll start off from down here, type in 3, then click and moving it 3 meters to this side, and finally we can cut it away again and end up with something like this. Now this is too thin, so I'll grab this bottom edge with Ctrl+Shift again and drag it 3 meters to this side. And I think this object needs a little bit more of detail. And because it's kind of like thin and tall, we can implement some vertical windows into it. For this, I can go ahead and isolate this guy, jump into the right view and pick the rectangle tool. And I'll just be using the grid snap in order to create these additional windows. Press and hold the Alt key to duplicate objects here in Rhino. And I'm going to be using the scaling tool on the y-axis to create this additional design to them. And you guessed it right, we are going to be cutting through this object like so. Let's show everything again. And it's looking pretty good. Obviously, we need to cut through this guy too. Therefore, let's use the cut tool on the x-axis this time. And there we go. We can delete these curves now. Now, I think the slab here is a bit too thick. And also, we might need to reduce the height of this geometry on the right side, because it's gaining too much hierarchy. And we can reduce the height by picking all of these surfaces and dragging them down a bit. Okay, this looks a bit better. Now we can create the window up here, and the fastest way of doing that is by picking this surface, typing in dot border, then offset by 0.5, inwards, pick the inner curve, use extrude CRV, and then snap it to this bottom edge. Now make sure that this is closed so we can pick this right surface and drag it to the left. And we obviously need to close this entrance, and we can do that just by grabbing the polyline and dragging a curve all the way over here and finally extruding it up. We can then select this surface, type in split, and I'm going to be selecting all of the objects so that we end up with this surface right here. Maybe we can drag it a little bit out and delete this surface over here alongside all of these objects that we no longer need. Now, because we're almost done with the modeling, I can go ahead and select all of the curves, so cell CRV, and delete them to clean up the model a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is to create a base for our design, for which I'll be just using a box. So let's click on the origin here, and with the grid snap on, we can actually snap to the vertices of the grid and build it just like that. And it's going to be nice to leave a gap here so that we can add some staircases. And I'm going to be marking with the polyline and the smart track tool where this entrance is going to be. Snap the polyline to this corner, down, and then to the left side. With the smart track on, we can snap it right where we need it, like so. And then by using the cut tool from our gumball, we can just cut this piece away. And now let's go for the stairs. So I'm going to be creating a curve from this side to this other side, offsetting this by around 0.3 meters, lofting these two curves, and extruding this down by negative 0.2 meters. Then by using the arrow of the gumball, we can lower it even more, 0.2. Now we can use the command copy, pick this corner, and copy these steps around 10 times. And I'm going to match the height of our base to the last step here by using the command move and applying the vertical tool up here. There we go. And I'm thinking that we can actually drag these faces outwards a little bit with the gumball again, like this, so that we create a little bit more movement to our design. This looks much better. Now I can do the same thing for this one, so drag it all the way over here and also create a cut gesture to this geometry on top. Let's type in isolate, jump into the top view, and again, by using the polyline, we can probably just cut it away like this by using these two polylines. Then back to perspective view and cut a piece of it away. We can even move these windows to the side by selecting the object and typing in solid point on. This way, if I go to the wireframe, we'll be able to see and select all of the control points and just move them to the side. Then type in show, and this looks much better. We can even drag this a little bit to the side here. The window at the back needs to come forth though, so let me grab it with Ctrl+Shift and drag it to this other side. And there we go. Now we need to pick a nice camera view, and if you want to, you can type in properties here and lower the value on the lens length. 50, it's a little bit too much. We can go with something like 24, for example, and while pressing the Ctrl key, we can zoom in a little bit. Also, you can see that it's a little bit distorted, so we can go ahead and click on this arrow, then all the way down to set view and change to 2-point perspective, so that it gives us a better angle for our final render. Let's close this and locate your camera somewhere nice. Make sure that you leave some space for the sky at the back so that we can add some buildings. I'm going to rotate this a little bit to the side to grab all of the details on the left view or left facade, and then we can change this from shaded view to an Arctic view, which will add some shadows and depth. Again, you can see that we have some curves hanging here, so we can select them by typing in cell CRV and delete them. Alright, next I'm going to be using the command view capture to file to end up with a high resolution screenshot basically of our design. And I think we might need a little bit more space to the sides here, so I'm going to be canceling this and zooming out a little bit. Again, view capture to file. Alright, great. And I'm going to be clicking on OK and saving this view. For the moment, you can use Nano Banana 2 or Nano Banana Pro completely for free in some websites such as Dreamina or Hixfield. In my case, I use it through InVideo. But keep in mind that I do pay a monthly subscription on InVideo because I get other AI models. Again, you can use other websites to get Nano Banana 2 for free. You can go to ai.invideo.io, then head over to Home and Agents and Models. Now let's move forward and click on Nano Banana Pro. Then New Project. You can call this project whatever you want, and then Create Project. In order to add an image, you just need to click and drag it here onto the chat. Now for this design, I'm thinking of using wood, concrete, and glass materials. So I'm going to go straight to it and see if Nano Banana is smart enough to place the materials where they need to go. Render this 3D model with wood, concrete, and glass material. Okay, and not bad at all actually. It nailed all of the surfaces that needed glass. That's amazing. And the UVW mapping of the concrete material and wood also looks great. And we forgot to change the format because this is horizontal, but we need to change it to match our screenshot. Okay, so let's go ahead and try that again. Let's close this. Change the format to square, and I probably want a darker concrete for the geometry on our right side, and the one that I'm referring to is this one right here. I think that's going to be ending up looking much better. So leave the center L-shaped geometry with wood, dark concrete for the geometry on the right. Okay, and it almost nailed it. Of course, I gave it a lot of instructions, so I didn't expect it to be perfect. But now we just need to add glass in here and on the top over here and get rid of this wooden texture on the geometry on the left side. So let's delete this prompt, delete this image here, then click and drag this newly created visual and type in what we want. Place glass on balcony and top incision. Leave concrete on the object on the left. Okay, and here we go. This is great. And I think at this point it's going to be more effective if we go ahead and download this image and mark where we want the concrete to be applied. So click on download, and I'm going to be using the edit tool here. Jump into markup, change this from blue to red, and point out what object I'm referring to. Okay, and I'm going to also be using the original image and also drag the marked version. And I'm going to be back once I've got the results. And here we go. It was actually giving me dark concrete, so I had to also specify that I wanted light concrete on the marked object. And I've tried it 3 times, but I haven't managed to get this column right here. So I'm going to be using this image, download it, and I think it's going to be much easier for it to understand that this is a column that now needs to be changed to wood. Click and drag it. Apply wood material to the marked column. Great, and we got it. And as I've mentioned at the beginning of the video, I want this to be in a plaza. So pretty straightforward. Let's delete this command, click and drag this image, and type in place this pavilion in a plaza. And here's our result, and I'm really impressed with it. The composition, the depth of the image. We have a little bit of shadow on the floor in the foreground. We have a tree on the left side, which fills in the overall visual. And of course, the details like benches and lighting fixtures. This is really great. To wrap this up, I think we need a little bit more of reflection on the glass from the entrance, or maybe some interior activity because it looks a little bit empty. Let's see what happens. I'm going to grab this result, add some activity in the interior of the building. And this is a little bit exaggerated, and we wouldn't be able to see the interior lights at daytime like this. So we can change it to add a subtle activity in the interior of the building, don't add interior lighting. Alright, this works much better. Now I want to see some decorative plants outside of the building. Add decorative plants on the entrance of the building. Click and drag the latest version and send it away. Okay, so we need to be careful with the words we use. I'm going to tell it to add a garden on the left side of the building's podium. Alright, much better. We see a garden that is actually incorporated into the design now. This definitely works. Finally, I'm going to turn this render into a night scene. Make this scene at nighttime. And as easy as that, we have a night version of our render. And if we want to add a little bit more of color and an extra realism, you can also go ahead and try some other models like Seedream 4 for realism, or even Flux Context. Seedream often likes to add a very warm LUT, as you can see. It doesn't look bad, but with a little bit of Photoshop, we can fix this. And finally, you can use models like Kling AI to animate this. For example, camera walks straight slowly, focusing on building. And this is the final animation that Kling AI gave me. And that's the full workflow, from sketching and modeling the building in Rhino to testing how Nano Banana Pro handles materials, lighting, and context. If you want to explore this project yourself, you can download the Rhino 3D model, the initial screenshot, and the final result on my Patreon. More Rhino plus AI experiments and design breakdowns are coming, so make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.